74,000 years ago, a volcano in Indonesia ejected so much ash into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun, plunged global temperatures by 15 degrees Celsius, and reduced the entire human population to somewhere between 3 and 10,000 individuals. You're alive today because that tiny, shivering band of survivors refused to die. Every other human species went extinct. Neanderthals, with their robust frames and brains actually larger than ours, vanished. Denisovans, who thrived in the harsh climates of Siberia, disappeared. Homo erectus, who'd survived for nearly 2 million years across 3 continents, blinked out. Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits of Indonesia, gone. At least 9 distinct human species walked this planet at various points, and 8 of them failed the ultimate test. But Homo sapiens, the scrawny upright apes with spindly limbs and almost no natural weapons, somehow thread the needle through every single extinction bottleneck thrown at them. The Toba supervolcanic eruption should have finished us. The ash cloud stretched across the entire Indian subcontinent. Sulfur dioxide choked the stratosphere for years. Ecosystems collapsed in a cascade of death. Yet when geneticists examine human DNA today, they find the signature of that bottleneck written into our genes like a scar. We squeezed through a keyhole so narrow that every person alive descends from that impossibly small founding population. What made the difference? Why didn't we join the fossil record alongside every other hominin? The answer isn't what you'd expect. It's not bigger brains. Neanderthals had those. It's not better tools. Neanderthals made sophisticated spears, controlled fire, even created art. It's not raw toughness. Homo erectus survived ice ages that would make our worst winters look like spring. The difference is something far stranger, something that sounds almost absurd when you say it out loud. Ancient humans survived because they talked to each other about things that didn't exist. Let that sink in for a second. While Neanderthals communicated, coordinated hunts, probably even had some form of language, Homo sapiens developed the ability to gossip about imaginary concepts. We could stand around a fire and describe a god that lived in the sky. We could plan for a harvest 3 seasons away. We could tell stories about ancestors we'd never met and places we'd never seen. This wasn't a small upgrade. This was reality-breaking cognitive technology. Around 70,000 years ago, something fundamentally changed in the human brain. Anthropologists call it the cognitive revolution. Suddenly, humans weren't just making tools that worked. They were making tools with symbolic meaning, carving patterns that served no practical purpose, creating the first true art. The archaeological record shows an explosion of creativity unlike anything before. Bone flutes, carved figurines, ochre body paint, shell necklaces traded across hundreds of miles. But the real revolution was invisible. It happened in the space between human minds. Neanderthals operated in bands of maybe 20 to 50 individuals, connected by direct kinship and face-to-face interaction. Their social world was immediate, concrete, tangible. Humans, armed with abstract language, could suddenly cooperate in groups of hundreds, then thousands. You didn't need to personally know everyone in your tribe. You just needed to believe in the same myths, the same ancestors, the same territorial boundaries marked by sacred stones. This changed everything about survival. When the Toba volcano erupted and the world turned dark, Neanderthals likely huddled in their caves with their immediate families, waiting for the ash to clear. Humans did something different. They formed coalitions. They shared information about distant water sources. They maintained trade networks across hundreds of miles, passing obsidian and shells and stories from group to group. When resources vanished in one region, humans knew where to migrate because someone 3 valleys over had told them about a place their grandfather once described. Flexibility became our superpower. Neanderthals were exquisitely adapted to their environments, but adaptation locks you into place. Their bodies were built for the cold, their hunting techniques perfected over millennia for taking down Ice Age megafauna in close combat. When the climate whipsawed and those megafauna vanished, Neanderthals found themselves masters of a world that no longer existed. Humans barely adapted at all. We stayed weak, slow, relatively hairless. But we could learn, we could innovate, we could completely restructure our entire way of life in a single generation. Archaeological sites in Africa show humans eating shellfish on the coast, then hunting antelope in the grasslands, then gathering tubers in the forests, sometimes all within a few hundred years. We were generalists in a world that punished specialists. When one food source collapsed, we pivoted. When one territory became uninhabitable, we picked up and moved, carrying our stories and our gods with us. The willingness to move saved us over and over again. Around 60,000 years ago, a small group of humans walked out of Africa, probably numbering no more than a few hundred individuals. They followed coastlines, eating shellfish and whatever else they could scavenge, slowly spreading east. Within 20,000 years, their descendants had reached Australia. Think about that. To reach Australia from Southeast Asia required crossing at least 60 miles of open ocean. You couldn't see land on the other side. You couldn't know if land existed on the other side. Yet humans built boats and went anyway. Neanderthals never crossed open water. Ever. Not once. They lived on coastlines, they ate fish, they had the technology, but they never made that leap into the unknown. Humans did. Constantly. Recklessly. Successfully. This wasn't bravery. This was something weirder. This was the ability to believe in a place that didn't exist yet, to trust a story about islands beyond the horizon, to sacrifice the known for the imagined. Meanwhile, back in Eurasia, Neanderthals were slowly dying out, not from some dramatic extinction event, just the gradual accumulation of bad luck. A harsh winter here, a failed hunt there. Their populations were always small, always fragmented. When a band of 20 Neanderthals got wiped out by disease or starvation, that entire lineage ended. Humans suffered the same catastrophes, but we bounced back. Our flexible social networks meant survivors could join other groups. Our long-distance trade networks meant we could maintain genetic diversity even across vast distances. Neanderthals and humans both faced the same Ice Age climate chaos, the same collapsing ecosystems, the same desperate scramble for resources. But humans had a trump card. We could coordinate on scales that made no sense for individual fitness. Consider this. When you hunt a mammoth with 5 people, everyone needs to eat. When you hunt a mammoth with 50 people, most of them will starve. The math doesn't work. There isn't enough meat to justify the coordination costs. Unless you're not just hunting for food. Unless you're hunting for status, for reputation, for a story you'll tell for generations about the great hunt when the sky turned red and the beast fell. Humans hunted in groups far larger than caloric efficiency justified because we were playing a different game entirely. We were building social capital. We were investing in relationships. We were creating myths. And myths, it turns out, are more durable than genes. Around 40,000 years ago, humans arrived in Europe and encountered Neanderthals on their home turf. For about 10,000 years, the two species coexisted. They even interbred occasionally, leaving traces of Neanderthal DNA in modern humans outside Africa. But it wasn't a fair fight. Humans brought networks. Humans brought innovation cycles that churned out new tool designs every few generations. Humans brought dogs, the first domesticated animal, which meant they could hunt more efficiently and defend their camps more effectively. Most importantly, humans brought demographics. Neanderthals lived in bands. Humans lived in tribes that encompassed hundreds of individuals united by shared beliefs and common enemies. When violence erupted, and it absolutely did, Neanderthals could field maybe 20 warriors. Humans could field 100. The end came slowly, like ink spreading across paper. Neanderthal sites in Spain, then France, then Eastern Europe, each going dark in sequence. By 30,000 years ago, they were gone. The last verified Neanderthal site is in Gibraltar, a final holdout clinging to the edge of the continent, surrounded by the ocean and incoming waves of humans who just kept coming. But extinction, pressure didn't stop with the last Neanderthal. Humans kept nearly dying, over and over again. 25,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum locked Europe and northern Asia under ice sheets a mile thick. Temperatures plummeted. Humans retreated to refugia in southern Europe, the Middle East, pockets of Africa. Populations crashed, entire cultures vanished. Yet when the ice retreated, humans exploded back out across the continents like weeds. 12,000 years ago, an asteroid or comet impact triggered the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to Ice Age conditions that lasted over a millennium. Civilizations that had just started farming saw their crops fail. Megafauna across the Americas went extinct. Humans, who just finished spreading to every continent except Antarctica, faced starvation on a global scale. We survived by diversifying. By the Younger Dryas, humans weren't just hunter-gatherers anymore. We were experimenting with agriculture in the Fertile Crescent, fishing societies in coastal Japan, complex hunter-gatherer settlements in the Pacific Northwest. When one strategy failed, others persisted. This pattern repeats throughout history. The resilience of Homo sapiens doesn't come from individual toughness. It comes from aggregate flexibility, from having so many different populations trying so many different approaches that something always works. Modern humans nearly went extinct again around 70,000 years ago during a megadrought in Africa that lasted for thousands of years. Lake levels dropped, rivers vanished, the Sahara expanded. Humans survived by clustering around the few remaining water sources, but the genetic evidence shows we crashed to maybe 10,000 individuals total. And we came back. Every single time, we came back. The secret wasn't physical. Humans today are actually weaker than our ancestors. The average human from 10,000 years ago could snap a modern Olympic athlete in half. Our brains aren't bigger. If anything, they've shrunk slightly since the Ice Age. We're not faster or more disease-resistant or better adapted to our environment. The secret was mimetic. We could transmit survival strategies across generations without genetic inheritance. A young learner could master in months what took their grandparents decades to figure out. Knowledge accumulated. Every generation stood on the shoulders of the last, building on innovations and discarding failures. Neanderthals made the same style of stone hand axe for 300,000 years. 300,000 years of almost zero innovation. Humans, in that same span, went from basic stone tools to agriculture, writing, cities, and computers. The difference is cultural evolution, running at speeds that make biological evolution look frozen in place. When a Neanderthal died, their personal knowledge died with them unless they'd had time to directly show their children. When a human died, their knowledge lived on in stories, in songs, in cave paintings, in the collective memory of the tribe. We became the first species that could learn from the dead. This is why humans spread across the planet while every other hominin stayed in their adaptive zone. By the time modern humans emerged from Africa, we were already equipped with the ultimate survival trait. We could learn to survive anywhere because we didn't need to wait for natural selection to adapt us. We adapted ourselves, culturally, in real time. The Arctic? Humans invented complex tailored clothing, ice fishing, and seal hunting techniques. The deep rainforest? Humans learned to neutralize plant toxins, hunt with blowguns, and navigate by subtle landmarks. The high Himalayas? Humans developed cultural practices that let them thrive above 15,000 feet. The open ocean? Humans became the greatest seafarers in Earth's history, navigating by stars and wave patterns to settle islands thousands of miles from the nearest continent. No other species in Earth's history has pulled this off. The breadth of human habitats is genuinely unprecedented. We're tropical apes who conquered the Arctic, desert specialists who mastered rainforests, coastal people who settled mountaintops, all without speciating, all while remaining interfertile across every population. The genetic unity of humanity is actually bizarre when you think about it. Humans have less genetic diversity than most other mammal species, despite living in far more varied environments. Two random chimpanzees from the same forest in Africa are more genetically different from each other than a human in Norway and a human in Papua New Guinea. That Toba bottleneck and subsequent rapid expansion left us remarkably homogeneous genetically, but explosively diverse culturally. Culture became our niche. While other animals adapted to forests or grasslands or oceans, humans adapted to adaptation itself. We became specialists in being generalists, experts in rapid learning, apex predators of knowledge transfer. And it almost failed anyway. Multiple times, the margin was always thinner than we like to think. Ancient humans didn't survive because they were destined to. They survived because they got lucky, over and over, in ways that compounded. The Toba eruption could have been slightly larger. The Younger Dryas could have lasted centuries longer. Any of a dozen climate catastrophes could have hit just a bit harder and snuffed out the last populations clinging to existence. We're the descendants of the luckiest, most stubborn, most irrationally optimistic apes who ever lived. The ones who saw the volcano erupt and decided to keep going. The ones who watched the ice advance and moved just far enough to survive. The ones who stared at the empty ocean and built a boat anyway. You exist because 10,000 years ago, someone you're related to chose to walk toward the unknown instead of giving up. Because 74,000 years ago, a handful of humans in Africa shared food when sharing meant their own children might starve. Because 300,000 years ago, someone invented a better way to make fire and bothered to teach it to the next generation. Humans didn't survive the gauntlet of prehistory because we were the strongest or the smartest. We survived because we turned ourselves into something stranger than any other animal. We became a species that lives half in the real world and half in a shared imagination, bound together by myths and stories and collective dreams. We became a species that bets on the future. That bet has paid off so far. Every human alive carries that legacy in their bones, the genetic echo of impossible survival against impossible odds. We're the species that wasn't supposed to make it. But we looked extinction in the eye over and over across hundreds of thousands of years, and somehow we're still here, telling stories about how we pulled it off.